Coming up on this week's Racing News Show, the most dominant team performance I've seen in a long time at Paris-Nice Stage 1. Was it Jumbo-Visma's tactics or their sheer strength that made the difference? I'll be taking a closer look. I will also look back at Strade Bianche with the freakiest crash I have ever seen, the Bloisonne Friesland Tour with the weirdest prizes I've ever seen, plus Le Samin, the Grand Prix Montserrat, and what we've got in store for you this week on GCN+. But I will start with Paris-Nice. The opening stages of that race are always nervous, with flattish, exposed roads, often buffeted by strong crosswinds in northern France. And yesterday for Stage 1, it was no different. Now, the wind wasn't quite strong enough to split the peloton on this occasion, but the power of Jumbo-Visma was. Let's break down exactly how they pulled off one of the most remarkable exploits I've ever seen in cycling. We're going to look in detail at the final 10 kilometres of the stage. In the 4 or 5 Ks leading up to this point, Jumbo-Visma had already set an astonishing pace, which has really strung the peloton out. Mainly down to this man, Mike Teunissen. He's got teammate Wout van Aert on his wheel. And new recruit Christophe Laporte is here. Just hidden here is Primož Roglic, and a bit further back, you have Nathan van Hooijdonk. If I move it on, you'll see just how fast they're going on this false flat downhill. Look, 76 kilometres per hour, and that moves up to 78, and it really strings the peloton out, as you can see on this shot. The front of the main bunch is just here, and basically anyone from this point onwards has absolutely no chance of taking stage victory on day one. Moving on slightly further, and you get a closer look at the effect it's had on some of the bigger name riders. Luke Rowe, yes, he's done a lot of work for his teammates throughout the stage, but big, strong classics rider, if he's having to swing out of the line on what is still a flat road, you know how hard the pace has been. Also in the background, you can see that Kevin Genietz is struggling to hold the wheel. And once we get onto the climb, the pace does not let up. By this point, Van Hooijdonk's managed to get himself onto the front of the group, and he's sprinting up it like it's the foot of the Tyenberg in the Tour of Flanders. Unbelievable stuff, and he quickly put some big-name riders into a lot of difficulty. Over on the left-hand side of the road here, Dylan van Baarle looking to see where his team leaders are, because he knows that he's not going to be able to keep up with the pace. This is Zdeněk Štýbar of Quick-Step Alpha Vinyl. Moving on, Van Hooijdonk is done for the day, and that leaves new recruit Christophe Laporte to take over from him. Now, what's interesting here is that if we look at this shot, Nairo Quintana, Adam Yates, well placed. This angle does foreshorten the distance, but nevertheless, they're certainly in the game at this point. However, Laporte continues sprinting on this climb, and they soon get themselves into difficulty. This is just another 180 metres further on from what we've just seen, and they're only 500 or 600 metres into this climb. But already, massive daylight opening up between a leading quartet and the great riders that are behind them. We've got Laporte on the front, Van Aert behind him, Roglic there, and the only rider able to keep up with that trio is Zdeněk Štýbar of Quick-Step Alpha Vinyl. This is Adam Yates. This is Nairo Quintana, two of the best climbers in the world. And whilst this climb is not suited to their characteristics, it's unbelievable that they have been distanced. Moving on, another interesting thing is that Christophe Laporte here, he's done. He's looking at what damage he's done to the rest of the peloton. The answer, Christophe, is an enormous amount, but he's still got the power to slot in behind Zdeněk Štýbar. This now is another 100 metres or so further up the climb, and you can see that even Štýbar is struggling to hold on to Wout van Aert and Primož Roglic. But somehow, I put the magnifying glass on Christophe Laporte, he finds the power, despite what he's done already on this climb, to go past Štýbar and eventually join back up with his two teammates at the front of the race. Absolutely incredible. And what that means is that we just have 3 Jumbo-Visma riders clear of everybody else over the top of a 1.2 kilometre climb. All they need to do is decide who is going to take the stage victory, and that decision was Christophe Laporte. As I say, he's a new recruit. He'd never won a World Tour race before yesterday. Now he has, and he'll be in the leader's yellow jersey today. Absolutely incredible. So was it brilliant mastermind tactics? Kind of. They certainly weren't bad, but in my opinion, that was down to sheer brute power from the riders within the team. Nobody had an answer, and that is an ominous sign ahead of the remaining stages of Paris-Nice, and indeed for the season to come. Now, with that performance, it's very hard to see Primož Roglič being beaten on the general classification, particularly with an individual time trial coming up. However, we thought that last year, didn't we? And he came unstuck on the very final day. The race continues with stage 2 today and what looks like it should be a bunch sprint on paper. However, there is the threat of crosswinds breaking the peloton up. Over to Italy, and on Saturday it was Strade Bianche. The men's coverage began with footage of a freak crash that had taken place on one of the key gravel sectors. Wind blowing so strongly across the road that it caused the majority of the riders in the front group to hit the deck. Now, my initial thoughts were that a race helicopter must have flown too close because the wind forecast for that day only predicted gusts up to 40 km/h maximum, and that wind was way stronger. However, it appears it was just an incredibly strong gust of wind. Barely anybody stayed upright by the end of it, with Julian Alaphilippe taking the hardest tumble, leaving him almost 2 minutes to make up by the time he got back up and changed his bike. He did manage to get himself back on, and so we had a lot of the main favourites still in contention at the crucial Santa Maria sector. Alaphilippe and Simon Clarke were amongst the riders to press on over the climb, but as it levelled off before a descent, Pogačar forced his way to the front and forced the pace on the descent. And this is what I love most about Tadej Pogačar. He's a double Tour de France champion, and this century it's been very rare to see any Grand Tour winner or hopeful taking risks and laying it all on the line in a one-day classic like Strade Bianche. But that's exactly what he did, and it was on that descent that he first opened a gap. Of course, he then proved stronger than the rest once they were climbing again, slowly but surely adding to his advantage. Carlos Rodriguez of Ineos Grenadiers chased, but ultimately found himself in no man's land, eventually caught by what was left of the group behind after a valiant effort. Pogačar's maximum advantage of over 1 minute and 40 seconds did come down as attacks came from Asgreen, Valverde and others in the closing stages, but with Pogačar able to just ride at his own pace, the results and the win was never really in doubt. A 50-kilometre solo attack, the longest winning move we've ever had at Strade Bianche. Pogačar is the only Grand Tour winner to win this race in what is only his third one-day race win, the other two being Liège-Bastogne-Liège and Il Lombardia, of course. Not a bad haul when you're 23 years old. Now, for those interested, Pogačar's time over that Santa Maria sector was 21 minutes and 3 seconds. That's 23 seconds slower than Tom Pidcock's KOM set last year, although with a less favourable wind. Pogačar didn't upload his power to Strava, but to give you an idea, he was over a minute faster than anybody else except Rodriguez, and Sebastian Reichenbach averaged 5.5 watts per kilo over that sector in the group behind. In the women's race, we had infinitely more suspense in the finale. Despite Annemiek van Vleuten-'s best efforts to go clear solo, she never quite managed it. Lotte Kopecky managed to follow her over the final gravel climb of Le Tolfe, and they were later caught, which meant we had one of the biggest groups I've ever seen at this event with 1 kilometre of the race to go. At that point, Van Vleuten was still the big favourite, but despite going up the hardest part of the climb into Siena in a time of 50 seconds, just 1 second short of the QOM, she couldn't get rid of Kopecky. She was sat in her saddle, producing massive power. Over the top, Kopecky managed to get past Van Vleuten on the narrow streets into Siena, got into the final corner first, and eventually took the biggest win of her career in what was one of the most nail-biting finishes I think the race has ever seen. Now, we wondered last week after Omloop whether the collective strength of SD Worx would be enough this season to outgun the individual might of Annemiek van Vleuten. As it turns out, although they did ride brilliantly as a team, including Ashleigh Moolman-Pasio, Kopecky was actually able to match Van Vleuten pedal stroke for pedal stroke on her favoured terrain and get the better of her by the finish. So well done, Lotte Kopecky, and I'd hazard a guess this will not be the only big win of 2022 for her. On to Le Samyn now, and there were some bizarre-looking tactics from FDJ Nouvel-Aquitaine Futuroscope in the women's race. Vittoria Guazzini was up the road in the finale with Trek Segafredo Shirin van Anrooy, but with about 400 metres to go, Clara Caponi went to the front of the chasing group and appeared to chase both of them down. Now, in a post-race interview, Caponi said that she started sprinting from a sign that she thought said 100 metres to go, then the next sign she saw said 200 metres to go. Now, we don't know how much different the result might have been without that move, but Guazzini still managed to take third at the finish. Coming past her was Emma Norsgaard of Movistar. Great to see her take a victory so early in the season. She outsprinted Chiara Consonni to the line. And what was lovely to see was that Consonni and Guazzini both helped Norsgaard open the champagne bottle on the podium when the Dane was having trouble popping the cork.
How many riders does it take to open a bottle of champagne, eh?
In the men's, a large group had gone clear and would duke it out at the finish. Matteo Trentin of UAE Team Emirates looked like he might have got boxed in at the barriers, but he found a way through and eventually got the better of Hugo Hofstetter at the line. Up in the Netherlands now, and the Blue Zoin Friesland Tour, formerly the Healthy Aging Tour, took place from Thursday to Saturday last week. It kicked off with a time trial, and it was won by world champion Ellen van Dijk. Her first win in the Rainbow Band since she won that title for a second time in Leuven last September, and incidentally, her first time trial in the Rainbow Band since then. Now, it's a race that is sponsored by Easy Toys, who provided some of their products as prizes. Now, under normal circumstances, prize money is shared equally between the riders within the team. But I'd imagine it's going to be quite hard to share this sort of prize. Maybe first come, first served. Now, the opening stage was not without its problems, though. The riders were faced with members of the public cycling in the opposite direction down the course, and there was even a car driving the wrong way down the finishing line at one point. Not good enough, really, for any race, let alone a UCI-sanctioned one, although I've yet to see any official comment about it from the UCI. Stages 2 and 3 finished in bunch sprints, won by Lonneke Uneken and Rachel Barbieri, respectively, and that, incidentally, was her first ever UCI win for Barbieri, so well done to her. Van Dijk took what was a relatively comfortable overall victory, her 5th at this race, with Rianne Marcus and Marla Reuser in 2nd and 3rd respectively. Meanwhile, at the Grand Prix Montserrat yesterday, Arnaud Delis underlined his credentials as a top sprinter by taking his 2nd win of the season in his first year as a pro. The 19-year-old got the better of Dries de Bont and Hugo Hofstetter in the sprint to the line. So, what have we got coming up for you this week on GCN+? 2 stage races, both of them World Tour. Paris-Nice continues through to Sunday and is available throughout Europe, plus the Asia-Pacific, excluding China, Japan and New Zealand. Is there anything anyone can do against the might of Jumbo-Visma? We'll find out over the next few days. The race that runs almost parallel with it in Italy is Tirreno Adriatico. Most of the world's top stars who aren't in France are competing in the race of the 2 seas in Italy. And amongst the GC favourites are Pogacar, Alaphilippe, Evenepoel, Vingegaard, Fuglsang, Buchmann, Kelderman, Pinot, Carapaz, Port, Uran, Padon, Mas, Ciccone, Bardet, Lopez, Caruso, Kuss and Barguil. Not a bad list, and that's before we even add in the sprinters at the race. Ewan, Cavendish, Malier, Kristoff, Ackermann, Demar, Viviani, Bauhaus, Buani and Matthews. By the time you watch this, the first stage, a time trial, will likely have finished. A battle between Ganna and Evenepoel, you'd have thought, but we'll see if anyone managed to upset them. On top of the stars that are racing, there's also a star in the commentary box this week. Robbie McEwen is going to be commentating for us here at GCN+ throughout Tirreno Adriatico. He'll also be on Milano-San Remo and the Tour of Flanders, and he's actually going to be here in our studios throughout the Giro d'Italia and the Tour de France this year. Many of you will have heard Robbie's commentary on either SBS or ASO's Tour de France feed, and I'm sure you will agree, he's one of the best in the business, especially when it comes to analysing sprints, so we're extremely happy to have him on board. Meanwhile, this weekend, the 2nd round of the Women's World Tour takes place in the Netherlands on Saturday. It's the Ronde van Drenthe. Leader of the series after round 1, Lotte Kopecky, will lead SD Works, whilst Lorena Wiebes will start as one of the big favourites for Team DSM. Beyond the racing, don't forget you can catch the World of Cycling on GCN+ on Wednesday. Pippa York and William Fotheringham the guests this week. Plus, we've got another new documentary out for you tomorrow. It's the Slow Pro Tour. Current World Tour pro Larry Warbass and former pro Conor Dunn ride across 5 of the Canary Islands in just 5 days. They camped on some questionable spots each night and managed to ride over the highest point of each island. Larry absolutely destroyed Conor's legs and had to wait for him at the top of every single climb, but Conor was always waiting for him to pack up his bivvy bag in the morning. Larry didn't know what a bivvy bag even was before this trip, as it was his first time camping, believe it or not. Brilliant adventure, plenty of detours, missed turns and discovered roads in a beautiful landscape out in the Atlantic. Here's the trailer.
Here we go!
Hey guys.
We did not know that we were getting that view. Now it literally feels like we're riding on the moon.
Yeah.
Larry! Where are you? We are in Canary Islands. Both planned this route together.
What? You planned the route. I had no say. I don't really know anything about the route other than we're doing 5 islands in 5 days.
Got a big adventure ahead of us.
Highest climb in Lanzarote. Andiamo, Larry!
Left behind there.
It's just like old times.
That is available for all GCN subscribers to watch from tomorrow, Tuesday the 8th of March. In other news, a quick update on the win tally for men's World Tour teams this year, and UAE Team Emirates have now taken the lead. Pogacar's win on Saturday was their 13th of this season, putting them 2 ahead of Quick-Step Alpha Vinyl. Jakobsen still leads the way on the individual rankings with 5 wins so far this year, although that could of course change between recording this and this video coming out.
Wout van Aert to go, but here comes Jakobsen. Jakobsen on the right in the blue, Wout van Aert on the left. Jakobsen's going to blow him out the water. 5-year Jakobsen wins again, the top sprinter in the world at the moment.
Alexander Kulik, honoured cycling coach of the Ukraine, was tragically killed last week during the invasion by the Russian army as he tried to help people to evacuate the country. It's another horrible story amongst many, and our thoughts are with Kulik's friends and family and everyone else caught up in this horrific war at the moment. Pavel Sivakov has been granted permission to race with a French licence for the season. Sivakov is a Russian but was born in Italy and has spent the majority of his life living in France and already held dual nationality. The UCI last week followed the IOC's decision to ban Russian and Belarusian athletes from international championships, as well as Russian teams from pro races. Alexander Zheniez has been convicted of domestic violence against his then-wife, Lucie Garrigueux, in November last year. The Frenchman recently won 2 stages of the Tour of Rwanda whilst the case was in progress, but has since been given a 4-month suspended sentence by a French court. However, no action was taken or even response given by his team Total Energies in the days after that sentencing. Eventually, they did put out a press release in which they didn't even name Geniez, but since then, team manager Jean-René Bernadotte has spoken to Cycling News, claiming that under French employment law, he is powerless to take any action whilst Geniez appeals the verdict. On their part, the UCI claimed to not even know anything about that case until the verdict was given, which is a bit worrying in itself because it had been covered on various cycling media outlets a month or 2 ago. They said they're going to refer it to their ethics commission and have not since commented. In much better news to finish with, Elisa Longo Borghini has signed a contract extension with Trek Segafredo, which will see her remain at that team for a further 2 years. Right, that's all for this week. I'm off to prepare my notes for Tirreno Adriatico, and I hope to have your company for that race this week. See you soon.